A fifth of you won't get to the end of this. From Sydney, the latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Spotify released a fan study for podcast creators. They say that fans who follow your podcast listen to 4 times the amount of episodes of those who don't. And episode completion rate varies from genre to genre, with true crime and fiction podcasts having the highest completion rate, while tech shows having one of the lowest. Also in new research, the State of Branded Podcasts 2022 report was released by Co-Host, a podcast hosting company. 2/3 of branded podcasts post every week, says that data. The winners of the 17th Annual People's Choice Podcast Awards were announced. 5.7 million listeners participated. The winners of the Gotham and Variety Audio Honours were also announced. There's been a jump in the average cost per thousand for podcast advertising, according to Libsyn's AdvertiseCast. The average is now $24.35, the second highest on record. It's up 3.7% month on month, or 5% year on year. Anchor continues to lose market share for total podcast episodes released last month, according to Livewire. The podcast hosting platform was responsible for 22.2% of all new podcast episodes in August, the lowest figure recorded. London ad agency Audio Plus has signed with Veritonic to use its attribution solution. It'll enable the agency to measure ROI of client audio ads. Excitement for Hocus Pocus fans, as it was revealed that a musical is on the way. The big reveal, apparently in the podcast, The Art of Kindness. Though, actually, you'd have heard the news a year earlier if you'd listened to the podcast The Big Seance in episode 195. Huberman Lab is to launch a paid subscription on Supercast. The show is consistently rated number 1 in its categories. The new premium subscription offers additional content. Here's a new word for you: Showcast. CBS has just launched one for The Young and the Restless. It's the audio track from the popular daytime drama set in Genoa City. Transistor is now supporting host and guest credits. In the UK, October's Pod Bible magazine was released inside some copies of the Sunday Times and is available to read online. It features interviews with cover star Brett Goldstein from Films to be Buried With and Jolyon Rubinstein from The New Conspiracist. We like page 27. Podcast recommendation newsletters are working on a podcast riddle challenge. The first 2 riddles dropped this weekend. You could win a fancy Sonos speaker. And Joe Rogan is no longer number 1 in Podnews' ranker. 40% of our mentions of people were of women in the 90 days to the end of September. In People News, Lucinda Treat has been hired as Crooked Media's first CEO. She joins from Vice Media Group, where she was Chief Legal Officer. Crooked Media has also announced an investment from George Soros, the amount of which was undisclosed. Emily Krumberger has joined Frequency Media as Associate Producer. She joins from radio and is finishing a certificate in documentary studies from Duke University's Centre for Documentary Studies. And Katie Klimacek has joined Frequency Media as graphic designer. From Chicago, she's also worked as a freelancer. It's a Monday, so time for some tech stuff. To improve the open OPORG user agent list, Podnews has produced a live tool that uses the data to give the apps used for 1,000 OP3 audio requests. You'll find it linked in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. Saturn, the Albi view into boostograms, now shows complete boost amounts, so you too can thank someone for a rush boost. Podping, a method of faster notification of your new episodes, is now supported by PowerPress. The Blueberry publisher is not far behind, Todd Cochran tells us. Even without PowerPress until now, Podping is continuing to grow in use. Of the 1.6 million new episodes published in September, Podping found 11.6% of them first, says John Spurlock. And Transistor's news support for host and guest credits also includes support for the podcast person tag. And in podcast news, in the latest episode of Content is Foreclosures. Frequency Media's CEO, founder and executive producer Michelle Khoury spoke about branded podcast networks and innovative audio strategies. The latest edition of Podtastic Audio talks to Podnews editor James Cridland, that's me, about working in radio and podcasting and how I came up with Podnews in the first place. And Emperors of Rome is celebrating episode CC tomorrow with a live recording at Acme in Flinders Street in Melbourne in Australia. Seems only yesterday that they did episode CXCIX. Anyway, the live event, it's free, looks at Antony and Cleopatra, how they fought against Octavian, brought about the end of the Republic and the start of a new age for Rome. The live show looks at their love affair, their war together, and their defeat. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.